Something's wrong with you, but not in the way they made you believe. You work, talk, laugh, hang out. On the outside, everything looks fine. But on the inside, there's a silence no one can see. A tiredness rest doesn't cure. A feeling of being absent, even when you're surrounded by people. And no, this isn't laziness or being too sensitive. It's just the emotional virus doing what it does best, hiding in plain sight. This virus doesn't give you a fever. It gives you indifference. It doesn't scream. It just quietly turns you off. Turns down your joy, your pleasure, your fear, even your pain. And the worst part? It installs itself so early that you grow up thinking it's just your personality, that this emptiness is simply how you are. But what if I told you there's an explanation? That behind your emotional shutdown, there's a system running in the background? That what you've been calling strength might actually be invisible trauma dressed as control? If you've ever felt alive, but not present, if you've wondered why you seem to feel less than you should, if your mind is always trying to escape the now, this video might be the key to reconnecting with what was taken. This isn't self-help, it's recovery, and it can start right now. The strange thing about some viruses isn't the chaos they cause. It's the opposite. It's how well they manage to make everything seem normal. You wake up, have coffee, smile, answer emails. Life moves on. But inside, something has shifted. Slowly, quietly, your body learns to survive on less. Your mind starts running with fewer emotions. And the worst part? You start calling that growth. People praise your calm, your practicality, your ability to handle it all. But deep down, you no longer feel the flavor of life like you used to. And you don't even notice. That's when the invisible trauma takes root. Not as tragedy, but as habit. And habits don't get questioned. They get repeated. This emotional virus doesn't erase who you are. It just teaches you to live without parts of yourself. You're still doing well at work, in school, in relationships. But everything runs through a dull lens, like someone set your internal settings to emotional power-saving mode. Ever told someone, "I'm fine," without knowing what you actually felt? That's not peace. That's effective anesthesia. This kind of adaptation comes at a high price, but a hidden one. When you shut down what hurts, you also shut down what brings joy. Emotions don't come with a toggle switch. When you shut one off, they all go dark. Over time, even the good moments lose their shine. Someone says they love you, and you smile, but feel nothing. You travel, reach goals, achieve things you once dreamed of, and yet, there's emptiness. And you begin to think that this emptiness is who you are, that you're just like that. Cold, distant, maybe even numb. But no, you're just running on a corrupted system. And a corrupted system keeps running, just slower, heavier, more confused. That's the danger. When everything still works, no one sees that something's broken, not even you. That's the trick of living on autopilot. Life goes on, even if you're emotionally offline. The body gets up, the mind solves, the routine swallows, and time passes. Before you know it, 10 years go by without remembering a hug that truly warmed you. 10 years without looking inward. 10 years just staying upright. And here's another layer. Society rewards this operating mode. The less you feel, the more productive you seem. The less you complain, the more mature they say you are. And that's where the virus grows strongest. When the world validates your internal disconnection. When you start taking pride in your own emotional silence. The truth is, you didn't get stronger. You just got better at hiding the pain. And the more you intellectualize everything, the farther you drift from your emotional identity. Like an antivirus that blocks what it can understand, including the most alive parts of you. Remember that random day when you cried for no reason? That wasn't weakness. That was your system trying to reboot. Your body saying, hey, something's wrong inside. But you ignored it. Scrolled through Instagram, made some coffee, switched back into emotional survival mode, and repeated another day of absence. That's how emotional repression hides, under commitments, productivity, and polite smiles. But no external performance can fully silence the traumatic memory that settled in without a sound. And speaking of memory, it's the virus's favorite target. It doesn't erase facts, it rewrites meanings. It makes you remember your childhood as peaceful when it was actually silenced. Makes you think nothing really bad happened when you actually learned early on to swallow your pain. Rationalizing pain is the brain's best trick for keeping you going, but not for healing. Healing requires feeling, and feeling is the very thing this corrupted system fears most. So pause for a second. When was the last time you truly felt something simple? When a song shattered you? When a conversation hit deep? If it's been a while, maybe the virus of adaptation has done more damage than you realize. But what if that's just the beginning? Because what really sustains this virus is even harder to detect. You don't suspect you unwell if you've never known what it feels like to be healthy. And that's the cruelest thing about emotional contamination. It enters too early. Before you've had the chance to build a real reference for safety, affection, or belonging. So everything that follows is accepted as normal. Growing up with chronic emotional pain is like living with a constant buzzing in the back of your mind. You learn to ignore it. You learn to keep going. And when someone asks if you're okay, you say yes, with terrifying sincerity. This normalization of invisible trauma creates something strange. People who don't feel sick, but also never feel fully alive. They function in a gray zone, not collapsing, but never thriving. And when something finally cracks, they don't understand why. I've always been like this, they say. But like this is just the result of years of emotional survival disguised as personality. Constant sadness becomes introversion. Emotional coldness becomes early maturity. Conflict avoidance becomes empathy. But all of it has a forgotten origin. It is not that these people are lying about who they are. It is that they've been contaminated by an emotional logic they didn't choose. They were shaped by fear, rejection, the absence of being heard, and the brain did what it does best: adapted. The emotional virus camouflages itself as common sense. And the earlier it takes hold, the harder it is to see. Because you become part of it. You start defending the beliefs born from pain, justifying behaviors that came from emotional repression, protecting the virus like it's your truth, and the world helps blur the lines. Who would question a well-behaved child, a mature teen, an adult who never overreacts? Society praises these versions, and you, desperate to belong, cling to them as your only path to acceptance. But behind every compliment, there's a part of you that got silenced, a need ignored, a desire locked away. Slowly, what was once emotion becomes habit. What was once pain becomes routine, and life starts piling up on top of you, without you even noticing. That's why people often break when everything seems fine, when they finally land that job, that relationship, that goal. Because emotional silence isn't relief, it's a delay. The pain you didn't listen to today returns tomorrow with more weight. What seems like a random breakdown is really a years-long accumulation of inner disconnection. That's why people hear, "But you always seem so calm." Of course, calm, because they were numbed. And how do you heal something you didn't even know was wounded? It starts with doubting what feels too normal. The lack of emotion, the forced neutrality, the calm that comes from emptiness, not peace. Real stability isn't the absence of pain, it's the presence of awareness. And to reach it, you've got to relearn how to hear what your body whispers before it screams. The headaches, the fatigue, the sleeplessness. They might not be physical. They might be symptoms of emotional contamination. The good news? You can start small. You don't need to dive headfirst into trauma. Begin by noticing the subtle discomforts, the anger you suppress, the yes you say when everything inside you wants to say no, the tears that never come. These small cracks in your system are virus alerts. You can begin there. Meditation helps. Therapy helps. But above all, stop convincing yourself that everything's fine just because you've learned not to complain. Because once you scratch beneath that layer of false normalcy, something deeper appears. When you realize the problem isn't feeling too much, but feeling nothing at all. And then your mind begins to search for control, for explanations, for logic, and without even noticing, you've entered a new stage of the virus, one where thought replaces feeling. Some people don't run from pain. They study it, break it down, turn it into theories. Because feeling is risky, but thinking feels safe. That's how the virus of control gets in. Quietly, under the disguise of intelligence. You start rationalizing everything. Your failures become graphs. Your losses, statistics. Your tears, neurological interpretations. And for a while it works. It even looks like growth. But the cost is high. Effective anesthesia. Because every time you think about what you feel a little less. This kind of emotional defense is refined. Hard to spot. It even gets praised. You're so mature, they say. So clear-headed. So composed. But inside, clarity became a shield. You don't love. You analyze. You don't grieve. You interpret. And your emotional life becomes a spreadsheet of self-observations. But who said observing is the same as living? Too much self-awareness can paralyze just as much as too little. Because in the end, you're not living. You're just narrating. And a narrator doesn't feel what the character feels. Of course, rationalizing has its place. It helps organize thoughts, avoid impulsive decisions. But when it becomes your default, it becomes a cage. You start doubting your own emotions, asking if what you feel makes sense, and if it doesn't, you dismiss it, as if pain needed logic to be valid, as if sadness had to come with a good reason. This is a psychological block, the inability to accept non-linear emotions. And within that block lies the prison. The repressed pain piles up. And one day, it doesn't come out as emotion. It bursts out as collapse. You know those people who have panic attacks after years of seeming fine? Or break down during a professional achievement? That's not random. That's the system screaming after years of being ignored. That's the body reacting to a mind that's been silencing it for too long. And if you relate to this, that may be your clue. Your urge to understand everything might be the very thing keeping you from feeling anything. And the more you try to explain, the further you drift from the center of it all, your own humanity. People who live in this hyper-logical mode tend to romanticize self-control. They think it's power, when really it's fear in disguise. Fear of losing control, fear of being seen as vulnerable, fear of facing the traumatic memory hiding behind all the logic. That's why so many people prefer reading about psychology over actually going to therapy, prefer watching videos on emotions than actually experiencing them. And this isn't a judgment. It's just a reminder. Rationalizing is useful, but it doesn't replace emotional presence. Want a practical step? Next time something stirs you, instead of thinking about how you feel, just feel. No captions, no labels, no fitting it into a theory. Just sit with it. With your body, with your breath, with whatever comes up. It might be uncomfortable at first, but over time you'll see. The feeling won't destroy you. What destroys you is trying to suppress it, to control it, to turn it into an equation. Emotion isn't a formula, it's presence, and presence can't be calculated. Sure, it's not easy. especially if you were taught that feeling is dangerous. Maybe you were judged, ridiculed, ignored. And so you built this shield, a sharp mind, ready to explain everything, except one question. What are you feeling right now? Because that question freezes you, exposes you, disarms you, but it also frees you. It's the question that starts the mind's reprogramming. That opens the path back to your emotional identity, not one built on performance, but on truth. And here's the thing, even with all that control, the virus still works, because deep down, you do feel, even if you deny it, even if you hide it, even if you bury it, your body knows, it's always known, and when control begins to fail, when logic stops being enough, that S when the virus digs deeper, that's when it stops being a defense mechanism and starts becoming who you think you are. There's a point in the journey where the emotional virus no longer feels like a threat. It becomes identity. You stop seeing it as something foreign and start believing it's a real part of who you are. Chronic shyness, quiet anxiety, the inability to open up. All of it stops looking like a symptom and starts sounding like a label. That's just who I am. But is it really? Or have you just said it so many times you forgot who you were before? The mutation is slow, subtle, and it reshapes your sense of self without asking permission. This shift shows up in the smallest choices, saying, I don't mind, or when everything inside you screams, accepting invitations out of obligation, keeping quiet to keep the peace. You become a master of seeming fine. And that calm people see? Often it's just the collapse of your capacity to respond. And the cruelest part? You start to take pride in the mask. You confuse emotional repression with control. You call your own numbness maturity. That's when the virus wins, when it no longer needs to fight you, because now it is you. The truth is, many people stop seeking change not because they found peace, but because they got tired. Tired of trying to be heard. Tired of explaining. Tired of trying to feel something deeper and always hitting a wall. So they settle. And worse, they start to like this detached version of themselves. Think it's balanced, chill, unbothered. But being light doesn't mean being shallow. And real detachment doesn't come from running. It comes from diving in. Skipping from surface to surface will never bring you the wholeness you crave. At this stage, the virus starts shaping your relationships too. You begin attracting people who reinforce this edited version of yourself. People who don't demand depth, who don't challenge your silence, who never push you to feel more. Safe relationships, because they're shallow, because they don't touch the parts the virus sealed off. And every time you avoid a hard conversation, every time you cover a tear with a joke, you're telling yourself, this pain doesn't deserve space. But it does. It has to. Or it turns into symptoms. And symptoms do show up, not how you expect. They come as procrastination, existential dread, that afternoon emptiness you can't explain, as insomnia, muscle tension, habits that feel comforting but slowly drain you. Your body starts carrying the weight of a soul that's been ignored, and all that used to be emotional becomes physical. But the most dangerous part? You start thinking that this limited version of you is all there is. You forget your emotional identity was stolen. You can go years, decades even, without accessing authentic emotions. The brain adjusts, routine takes over, and you keep going. But you don't grow. You just repeat. Just survive. And maybe this is the virus's deadliest form, when you no longer miss what you lost. When you forget there was ever another way to feel. And if someone tries to show you that, you defend the virus. Because admitting you're emotionally numb means dealing with everything you've been avoiding. But it's not too late. The fact that you are even questioning who you've become is already part of the cure. Asking, who would I be if I weren't afraid, is one of the most powerful things you can do. The answer won't come all at once. but it will come. As you uninstall beliefs, patterns, and traumatic memories that were coded into you for emotional survival. And this process? It's not glamorous. It's messy, slow, silent. But it's real. And for every part of you that was stolen, there's a version waiting to return. And that return won't look like a miracle. No music swelling in the background. No perfect ending. It's reconstruction. It's learning how to be present in a conversation without mentally checking out, to feel without analyzing, to let yourself be moved, to cry during a movie, to laugh without apology. That's how mental reprogramming begins, in the details. But there is one last obstacle, the fear of losing the only version of yourself you've ever known, the fear of being someone without the virus. Removing the virus isn't like clicking a button. There's no confirmation message, no "congrats, you're clean" screen. In the beginning, you don't even know what you're cleaning. You just feel off, like something in you no longer fits. A strange restlessness, as if your mind is running outdated code. That's when the update begins, when you grow tired of the current version of yourself and decide to install a new one that doesn't need to suppress emotion just to function. But the transition is rough, because the old system, even if broken, felt familiar. It didn't bring happiness, but it kept you safe. It taught you how to survive. Letting go of that way of being is like learning to walk without crutches for the first time. It hurts. You stumble. You doubt. You consider going back. But you don't. Because something inside you has already awakened. And once it does, it doesn't fall back asleep. You begin to notice the triggers, the emotional repression you once called calm. How your life was really just a simulation of presence. Reprogramming the mind takes more than good intentions. It takes courage. Courage to face the traumatic memory you always avoided. Courage to feel all the things you've ignored for years. Courage to cry for no clear reason. And perhaps hardest of all, courage to feel joy again. After so long being numb, even happiness feels threatening. Emotional freedom might feel unsafe, but it's within that freedom that your true identity lives. Not the one you were taught to perform, but the one you were born with. Tools can help. Therapy, of course, but not just any therapy. Seek methods that reconnect mind and body. EMDR, somatic therapy, neurofeedback. Practices like meditation, yoga, or therapeutic journaling can act as emotional gateways. Need a place to start? Try this. Write a letter from your most vulnerable self to your most logical self. Read it out loud. Pay attention to how your body reacts. It won't solve everything, but it might open a door. And sometimes that's all you need. A crack of light. As time passes, you start realizing how long you've been on autopilot. You remember conversations you were physically present for, but emotionally absent from. You replay choices you made out of fear and called logic, and you see that there was nothing wrong with protecting yourself. But now you have the chance to live differently. Inner healing isn't about going back. It's about being reborn inside the present. One step at a time, toward your original self. And it's not out there. It's right here, waiting for you to stop running. Make no mistake, life will test this new version. People will find you strange. Relationships will shift. Some bonds will break, not out of spite, but because they were built for a version of you that no longer exists. Everything that was designed to keep you asleep won't survive once you wake up. And there's grief in that, but also relief. You don't have to fake it anymore. Not for others, not for yourself. From here on, you get to exist, without edits. And no, it won't be linear. There will be setbacks. Days when the old system tries to reinstall its lies. Inner voices whispering, "You were better when you didn't feel so much." But now, you recognize those whispers. You know where they come from. You know they're echoes, not truths, and you can choose not to follow them. Emotional awareness is just that. A daily choice. A commitment to your humanity, to your story, to everything that was erased and is now being reclaimed. So if something in you feels like it's rewriting itself, keep going, even if no one else understands, even if the path is unclear, because what comes next isn't about removing the virus anymore. It's about what's born in the space it left behind. And that's where the real question begins. The question that changes everything. Now tell me, how many versions of yourself have you let die just to fit into what others expected from you? How many times did you swallow your voice, smile out of politeness, or stay silent to avoid conflict, without realizing you were betraying yourself a little more each time? The emotional virus doesn't come with obvious symptoms. It doesn't scream. It silences. It convinces you that everything's fine while slowly erasing your ability to feel. But now that you know, what are you going to do with that awareness? Will you keep living on autopilot? Or will you face the process of reprogramming your mind and reclaiming who you were before all this? You don't need to have all the answers yet, but you do need to take the first step. Maybe it means finding the right kind of therapy. Maybe it means writing down what you've never dared to say out loud. Or maybe, for the first time, it just means admitting that yes, there's pain, and that's okay. Healing begins with honesty. If this video stirred something in you, if it woke up a part of you that's been asleep for too long, leave a comment. Tell me what hit the hardest. Let us make this channel a place where no one has to pretend they refine anymore. And if you want to keep exploring this kind of conversation, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around. Because this is just the beginning.